Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you this
Hey,
morning.
good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We took last week off. You were out of town, and we had all kinds of other things going on, and so we didn't do any recordings or anything last week. I mean, it wasn't that anything happened, over the past couple of weeks that we would be talking about or that would cause anybody stress or any
I
issues.
wondered, I wondered how you were going to introduce that topic. That's right.
No,
Nothing. You must be talking about that economic summit in South America or something,
that's exactly it. But
How are you doing, by the way? I haven't seen much of you. Doing okay over
I'm
there? I almost said over there. It's like we're across the ocean, but
right.
office,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're just we're almost neighbors, but we hardly see each other physically because of our
Right.
schedules. But no,
Yeah.
doing all right. And but I'm excited about the topic today because it's, we always like talking about parenting. We always like talking about, especially parenting as it relates to, kids, their goals and their outcome and school and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, the idea of parenting to perfection. We're trying to raise kids to be perfect. It's an interesting topic for us to discuss today.
Right. It's a generational thing because I don't remember this in my generation. I don't think you do either, do you? That
Uh,
parents worked very hard to be perfect parents. They were doing everything for their children, but in a way, they were doing it for themselves to be the perfect parent. And this word perfect is kind of what we want to stress today, perfectionism. And what is interesting about this topic for us, I think, is that there are parents who do subscribe to the school of parenting that if you get it right, if you do everything right, your child will be successful, however they define success. And it's partly career and money and income and all that stuff. I think we generally agree on what success is. So there are parents who subscribe to this type of parenting as if I do everything right, my kid's going to turn out okay. And then at the other end is this notion um, that we have to push and push and push and push and push on these kids to achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve. And what brings to mind is that recent story that hit the news where a student at a high school was given a low grade, a 55 or something. It wasn't in in academic trouble, but he was given a lower grade because he used AI on an assignment.
mhm.
And it was the teacher had said you can't use AI, and so he got this low grade. And his parents sued the school district. They sued the teacher, the principal, the school. They sued everybody because they said if he gets an A minus or a B plus in a course, it will jeopardize his opportunity to go to Harvard and Stanford and MIT and all these places he wants to go to. So they actually filed suit because this would have apparently ruined this kid's perfect score.
Right.
And it's this pursuit of perfectionism, whether it's to make your kids perfect or to make you a perfect parent, that has a downside. There's a cost associated with it. That's kind of what we want to talk about today.
Yeah, because the big question is, and I don't even know that it's really a question so much as it is an observation that, kids in high achieving schools um, tend to have elevated rates of anxiety, depression, and other mental health, some other mental
Right.
health complaints and stuff. And, we wonder why, but yet when you break it down and you look at it, even from that single example that you just gave, it shouldn't be a wonder. We shouldn't be questioning why this is happening. It seems like it's pretty obvious. We are putting kids under this tremendous stress. And imagine being a ninth grader, you're 14, maybe 15 years old, and you are being told that everything that you do in every class that you take is going to set the trajectory for the rest of your life.
Right.
That
Right.
if you make a mistake now at 14, that it's going to, it could potentially ruin everything that anything else that you ever want to do. Uh,
Hmm.
that's that's ridiculous. That's
Right.
that's a level of pressure that is just far exceeds what is necessary, what's certainly what's appropriate for kids. We totally get the idea that that example that you gave. Totally understand that. Yeah, the way that colleges work now, if you don't have that 5.0 out of a 4.0 scale, that is going to make it more difficult to get into some of these schools, these colleges. But at the same time, just because you don't go to one of those schools doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. Neither of us went to Harvard or any of those Ivy League or elite schools like that. I went to a state school,
Right.
and I would measure what I'm doing as successful because I'm meeting some of those personal goals that I had set for myself. Um, so it's so confusing why people feel as though they have to put their kids under this kind of pressure. And so that there was a journalist, Jennifer Wallace, and she worked with Harvard Graduate School of Education, and they were looking at some of these things. And Richard, some of those statistics that they presented are just amazing. Like 73% of parents believe that getting accepted into a prestigious college is, the most important ingredient for life success for their kid.
Right. Yeah.
That's
No, and that's that whole. There was an article today about that what the effect that Ivy League colleges have had. Um, but 3 out of 4 parents believe that that's what they must do, and so they begin
right.
pushing these kids before they go to school. The right kindergarten, the right preschool, the right elementary school. Everything has to be perfect. 83%. And here's the other issue: 83% believe that their children's academic success is a reflection of their parenting. And so
I
again,
think
you get both things happening.
I think that is the major driving force, or at least one of the major driving forces, because you know getting into an Ivy League school or getting into a prestigious school, is later success. Well, your child's success, if you see your child's success as a reflection of how you did as a
Right.
parent,
Hmm.
you're going to be even more driven to that. You want them to be successful, but you also want to look like a successful parent.
Right. Yeah, if there was one thing I'd like to convince parents of is that you have a great deal to do with your children's um, emotional, physical, academic development, but you don't have total control.
Hmm.
And your children's success or failure may not be your fault. It might be, and we can talk about that, but it may not be. It may be something a child does not want to go the academic route. Has the ability, but
Hmm.
elects not to. That may not be a reflection on your parenting. So you have
Right.
to be very careful about blaming yourself for your children's successes or failures. Also, if children succeed, it should be their success, not yours,
Right.
because otherwise it's an imposter syndrome. You enter that arena where the kids say, "Yeah, I was successful, but it was my mother got me here. It wasn't anything I did."
Right.
That's hard on a person's self-esteem.
Right.
So, but we do have this world. We find ourselves in this world
Hmm.
of competition.
Right.
Um, and the book that Wallace wrote, Never Enough, when achievement culture becomes toxic. Um, this sort of the desire to succeed is a positive motivational force.
Hmm.
But if it gets to excess, then it can start to be detrimental. And that's what we're worried about, is that yes, it's good to have goals, expectations, but be careful, because if you push too hard, you're going to have some uninvited consequences, unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
So we have this world, right, of in the past 50 years, I guess, no, I know that things have become more challenging. I know that my children's schooling was vastly different from mine. Um,
Absolutely.
I don't know that I could have survived elementary school the way my children went to elementary school. I mean, we had recess 3 times a day when I
Right.
was in school. We had a morning at lunch and after lunch in the afternoon. My kids had silent lunch. They had to read, they had to do. So there was this competition. So there's been a cultural shift.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're dealing with is something called the zero-sum game. I never quite understood what that meant until recently. There's only so much to go around,
Right.
and you have to get yours.
Right.
Um, and because there isn't enough for everybody, so you have to be better than everybody so that you can get your share because there isn't enough to go around.
Right.
And then the other factor is this sort of rugged individualism that seemed to creep in sometime in the 60s. Of the you have to do it yourself. I did this myself and I did that. But it also led to I have to get mine
Right.
and I have to get my kids. I
Right.
have to arrange things for my kids. So I have to succeed. Um, not my kids' school has to get better, but I have to get my kids in exactly the right place, wherever that happens to be. And there was a time when PTAs used to make schools better. Now parents are just looking out for their own child. Where can I send my kid to get the best education? Okay.
Absolutely.
So there's that individual. And the other thing is, besides these two cultural shifts, is um, people today are trying to reach idealized levels of success and perfection that they usually see on the internet and especially on social media. That's the ideal that they're pursuing, and it's probably not a realistic ideal. So we have to be careful about that.
Absolutely. And all of this, in many ways, has led us to this idea of sort of parent-driven perfectionism, where, sometime in the last, 30 to 40 years or so, things shifted from, as you said, sort of this, we're all working together to make things better, to that shift to what can my kid, how can I be successful? How can my kid get more of that, more pieces of the pie, or a bigger piece of the pie than other people? And you and I were talking just the other day about travel ball teams, whether it's soccer or baseball or football or whatever the case may be. um these kids are pushed and pushed and pushed again to this idea of perfection, where they are spending hours every day uh,
Mhm.
to try to be the best, and they're like 8 years old or 10 years old. And it's like, why you're spending all of this time, so they're
Mhm.
still expected to make straight A's. They're still expected to, attend every event that's going on in the community, but they're
Mhm.
also expected to, be the best soccer player on the field. And if they're not getting enough play time, then we need to work more, and we need to argue and complain to the coach and make sure that everything's happening exactly the way it needs to be. And again, all this idea with the idea of my kid has to be the best at all of this.
Right, right. And that I was shocked when we played sports, baseball, for example, we had our cleats, our shoes, and our glove.
Hmm.
Okay, so we had two items.
Right.
We would bring them to practice, and everything else was provided by the school or by the team or whatever, bats and balls and all that. When my first son started to play baseball, we had to buy a bat, a metal bat. We had to buy a bag to carry all of his stuff. You had to buy all this stuff. It was hundreds of dollars. So we could play baseball. I never spent hundreds of, everything was provided. But this is the age of we're going to do this differently now, and it's being done differently. In the 1990s, we say this began in the 70s, but in the 1990s, remember, for those of you who had children or were in school in the 90s, this was the era of test scores. Everybody was being tested, of travel teams, of hitting coaches, and parents did all that they could in every arena to clear the path for their child so that their child could excel. And that sort of zeitgeist, that this is the way we do things now, really hit in the 90s and has accelerated since then.
Right.
But this is what we call parent-driven perfection. Okay. Um, there's three types of perfectionism, and this is the other place where we begin to encounter problems, because of the three types, the first one is called self-oriented, And this is where we set our own goals. You said earlier, that you're achieving your goals. So you set these goals. If any kid decides they're going to get straight A's, as long as they're doing it without damaging themselves, without hurting themselves in any way, without putting undue pressure, I say that's a lofty goal. If they want to be a professional athlete, that's a lofty goal.
Right.
So these are self-oriented where you work to achieve them.
And it is very different when a kid sets that goal for themselves, not because they feel like they have to for their parents, because
Right.
that's the next one is other oriented, and that's when, some you're projecting the need for perfection on someone else. And so
Right.
a kid may feel that their parent um is projecting it onto them. But this idea that if a child has these high goals for themselves, oftentimes that's okay.
Right.
And as you said, as long as they're not harming themselves, as long as they're not like freaking themselves out every time, they get a 89 on a test instead of a 90, it's okay. Um,
Mhm.
but self-oriented is, that can be okay.
Right.
We
Because
have
it's a
this other
realistic,
oriented.
right. It's a realistic goal or should be a realistic goal. There are many students, Brennan, you've talked about this many times. Students will come and say, well, I want to go to graduate school. I want to go to medical school, or I want to be a dentist. Um, but they're in the 10th grade and they have a C average,
Right.
and you say, wait a minute, if you want to, if that's your goal, then you need to start performing differently in school. Let's make sure the goal is realistic,
Right. Right.
right? So those are self-oriented goals. Then there's other-oriented where you're projecting, and it might be realistic or unrealistic
Right.
standards or goals on somebody else. I want my son to be a linebacker. Well, your son is shaped like a ballet dancer. He's not going to be a linebacker. He just doesn't have he's not big enough, he's not strong enough, and he's not interested. But the one that's most problematic is what are called socially prescribed.
Right.
And that is that other people, maybe you know them and maybe you don't,
Hmm.
other people expect you to be perfect. It's not the other oriented where somebody's projecting them on you like a parent. These are socially prescribed. This is stuff we pick up from the internet. This is stuff we pick up from our gang, our posse. Is there's this expectation, not from anybody you know, but there's this feeling that you have to be perfect. And in the past 28 or 30 years, that's the perfectionism that has increased the most. And that's what's most alarming here is that there's been an increase in all types of perfectionism, but almost twice as much in socially prescribed. And that's coming from the internet. And that's those unrealistic expectations, the unrealistic goals.
Right. Because oftentimes these impressions of perfectionism aren't, as you kind of said, aren't necessarily real. They're not tangible. Like your parents can say, "I want you to make all A's." Well, we know what all A's looks like. We know what that is. But a lot of
Mhm.
times when when we're picking up some of these things from the internet or from social media or from different sources, it's less tangible. And so it's just this overall sense of I have to be better, I have to do more, I have to work harder, I have to, obtain more. And so it's less tangible, and it's not, it's not focused on you specifically. And because of that, it creates far more distress, far more
Right.
problems for people because you're trying to attain something that you don't even know what the goal is. It just,
Mhm.
being better is different than saying you need to, I mean, it's even different than saying you need to make all A's. Making
Right.
all A's, that's a clear line. But Richard, I'm sure that you've met people where they make all A's, but that's still not enough. It's like they feel like I have to do even better. It's like, well, what's better than all A's? And
Right.
they can't even articulate it, but there's this internal drive that they feel like they have from these various sources.
Right. I think of the quest to be valedictorian of your class today it's a blood sport. I mean, it's not just you've done well. It's you've engineered you've taken college classes and AP classes, and everything you do is designed to have the highest grade point average. And in many schools, you're talking about a tenth of a point or a
Right.
half a point difference between the valedictorian and salutatorian. So there is a toxic side to this. And what got us interested in this was that from 2015 to 2019, so recently, we've all heard about the rates of anxiety and depression going up in teenagers. We're all aware of that now, that there's something going on. And what we've also learned is that it's 6 to 7 times, the rates are 6 to 7 times higher in high achieving schools. And they're even 5 times higher than in the normal, the sort of representative group. So in places, whether they're schools or athletic teams that are high achieving places, you're going to get elevated rates of anxiety and depression. And that's where you have to be careful. That's where everybody, including the school administrators, need to be a little more mindful of what's happening behind the scenes. Yes, these kids are achieving, but what else is happening to them? And that's what we worry about.
Absolutely. And as we were kind of suggesting here, the sources of a lot of this is a little bit
Yes.
more ubiquitous. It's a lot of social media, for example.
Right.
We've
Mhm.
talked many times, and most of you all listening know that the images and the stuff that you see on social media, on Facebook and on Instagram and stuff, it's so much of it is artificial. That candid, spontaneous photo. That there were really like 50 pictures taken and weeded through to find the perfect one to post that one. Or all of those smiles on that vacation are just for that. Just a moment ago they were yelling at each other or something. So it's but when we look at social media and we only consume social media and kind of forget the reality of life, sometimes we begin to have this impression that, okay, this is look at how perfect that is. Look at how perfect their life is. And we start to strive for that. We start to imagine that that's what it's supposed to be like, and then it creates so much more stress, so much more anxiety with things. We
That's
do
right.
that, especially with our kids, when we see other people posting about their kids. Oh, my kid did this or my kid did that. That's great, but we don't know any of the story behind how that happened.
Right. Yeah, when I think of TikTok and YouTube and all these, and I think of the images that pop up, of men who are physically, have this muscled, chiseled body look, and women who are, these perfect bodies, perfect faces, perfect hair. And kids are getting bombarded with that. When we were growing up, there were models in magazines, and you would compare yourself and say, "Wow, I'm a slug compared to him or her." Um, but kids are getting bombarded with this 24 hours a day. And those, our brains aren't quite ready for that kind
Right,
of compare or those kinds of comparisons.
right.
Um, we compare ourselves to people that we live with, who look pretty much the way we look, and we compare ourselves to them. Well, now kids are comparing themselves to an ideal, whether you're a male or female. You're comparing on social media, you're comparing yourselves to the ideal. And there's a danger in doing that because you're not going to be that. That's not how people really look in real life, even models. You wouldn't recognize most models if you saw them in real life.
Absolutely.
So perfectionism comes from social media, striving, from college applications. You have to have, like if you have 5.0 on a 4-point system, and you have to have 12 or 1500 on college boards. So college admissions have driven this, and also parenting has
Right.
driven. So there are three sources: social media, college applications and admissions, and parenting perfectionism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's all, again, driven, as we're thinking about, especially about the parenting part, all of this is driven by, as we said earlier, that we want our kids to succeed, but then how much of that drive that we have is related to, it's a reflection on us. And so parents are, even though we're kind of projecting this need for perfection on our kids, there's also a sense for the parents of a need for perfection because we need our kids to be perfect,
That's right.
and so it becomes a very complicated, you know, phenomenon and interaction between what we're trying to do for our kids and what we're trying to sort of manifest for ourselves.
That's right. And herein lies the essential problem, the kernel of this whole thing, is that in an effort to create the perfect circumstances for a child, this idea that you have to achieve and achieve and achieve, the danger here is to relate a child's self-worth to their achievement. That you are valuable, you are important, if you are achieving at this level, whether it's dance, music, athletics, school, if the focus is on your achievement, it's very easy for children to make the assumption that they only matter if they're achieving at that level, if they're meeting their parents' expectations. And that's the kernel of the problem right there.
Absolutely, because we've talked in podcasts in the past, and maybe we need to kind of revisit this idea that your love for your children should be unconditional. You love your kids even when they make mistakes, even when they're struggling. But sometimes parents will phrase things or say things or overtly do things to suggest that, well, me loving you is dependent on you being compliant or you reaching some level of success. That's exactly what we're talking about here, that kids in these situations are often left to believe that the only way that they matter to their parent, the only way that they matter in the world even, is if they are the best, if they are at the top of every list. And
Right.
that is a very dangerous way to arrange things for your kids, because the likelihood of them always being on top is very small. So the more that you push that, and the more that they are left with the impression that they only matter if they are reaching this high level of success,
Right.
the more anxiety and depression and mental health issues they're going to have.
Yeah, we never want to give kids a feeling. I'll love you a lot if you get B's, but I'll love you more if you get A's. I'll
Right.
love you more and give you more attention if you get A's. Dangerous game. That's a dangerous notion for a kid to develop, because they begin to feel that your attention, love, and caring about them is relates to their success on
Right.
the athletic field or in school. And what we want to stress instead, and I'm not sure we have time to really get into this in any detail, it's called mattering, that children matter. That is to say, they have a feeling of being valued and loved regardless of their success in the classroom, that I know my parents are going to love me whether I get A's or C's. That's called mattering. And it's what we have to inculcate in our kids, is this feeling that they matter to us regardless of their achievement and success.
Right. And that's what I was alluding to a minute ago, that, this idea that you care for your kids and they are important and they are, just because they don't reach this level of success doesn't mean that they're not successful. Um, a lot of parents will give it some lip service that, well, if he's trying, as long as he's trying his best, I don't care if he gets A's. And Richard, how many times have you heard that? And if you pause just for a moment, it's almost always followed up with, but I know that he can make A's.
But I know that he can, right?
Right. And so it's like you're saying that you would love him no matter what, but you're also saying, but I know that he really should be making A's, and that's how I really.
That's my real expectation,
Right.
and the kids, and they know that. Okay. So as you approach this, keep in mind, it's okay to have goals and it's okay to have high standards and it's okay to have expectations, but they have to be realistic for this particular child.
Right.
Okay, that number one. Number two, they have to be suited to this child, to this particular child. So first of all, the goal has to be realistic. Then it has to be suited to this child. There are kids who are not athletic. So, and we need to recognize that there are kids who should be doing other things. And so whatever we do, it has to be suited to the child. And the third thing, and I think this is where I think there should be more emphasis. They have to be able to reach that. The child has to be able to reach that goal on his own. If it takes massive parental support of negotiating with coaches, negotiating with teachers, helping the child, doing the child's homework, keeping the child organized, that's not the child's success. That's your success as a parent. So make sure that they are able to reach and achieve these goals on their own.
Right. And the balance with that is that the child needs to know, has to know that your acceptance of them does not rest on whether or not they meet your goals. They
Right.
have to know that you're going to accept them and love them and be there for them, whether they meet that goal or not.
Right.
You know, and again, kind of recognizing that parents will say, yeah, as long as he's trying his best, make
Mhm.
sure that that's where it lies, that it's not, yeah, but that there's no yeah, but after that. And,
Right.
and as you said, it's got to be the child's accomplishment. We we're seeing far too many college students who get through high school much so with the help of their parents, and they get to college where now the parents can't help, and the kids are floundering. They're having such a difficult time, and it's because nothing that has happened so far has been the child's accomplishment. It's been the parents' accomplishments the whole time.
Right.
So
They don't know how to succeed.
they don't, yeah,
Somebody else has done it for them. Somebody else has shepherded them through each step, and they've never learned how to do it on their own. You know,
absolutely.
and
So
eventually they're going to have to, either in college or after college, or at some point they're going to have to do this themselves.
right, and the earlier they have to do it themselves, the
The
better.
earlier, the better. Make your mistakes early on, and right. Mhm.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
I think that's it for today. Obviously we'll talk more about parenting stuff in days to come, but it was good to see you today, and good to be back at it this week. And we'll be back midweek for another podcast talking about some more important things that are happening in the world. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.